Oregon Railroad and Navigation Company, number 197, is a 462 Pacific steam locomotive, built by Baldwin in 1905 for, well, the Oregon Railroad and Navigation Company. She bears a strong resemblance to Southern Pacific locomotives of the same era, as she was designed to pull passengers on the railway. Initially, she was actually constructed as a volcane compound, along with her three sisters, 194, 195, and 196. She continued to serve the railway, and then in 1923, she and her sisters were given heavy modifications, redesignated to the P2 class, by the Union Pacific Railroad at their Albina Yard in Portland. Union Pacific at that point now owned OR&C, just so we're clear. These modifications included a new Vanderbilt-type tender. As stated, originally she was actually a compound, a four-cylinder compound to be precise, and she had a Stephenson valve gear, having the high-pressure cylinders located between the frames. Those high-pressure cylinders drove the second driving axle, which was of a crank design. The low-pressure cylinders received exhaust from the high-pressure and were located on the outside, and they would drive the second axle more conventionally. But the 1923 redesign changed her to a simple, single-expansion engine, with just two cylinders, and her valve gear was converted from a Stephenson to Wolshart's. She and her sisters were also renumbered to Union Pacific 3200 through 3203. 197 was 3203. But the rebuilding was a success. The locomotives performed well and survived until the very end of steam. They continued being used until January of 1958. Union Pacific is known historically for being pretty generous when it comes to donating a lot of their retired steam locomotives. Towards the end of the steam age, they were much better than most in this regard, and they decided to save at least one of the P2s, and that wound up being 197, then still numbered as 3203. Union Pacific donated the locomotive to the city of Portland, and she was placed on display near Oaks Amusement Park, in what was known as Oaks Pioneer Park. Yep, if you watched my recent video on number 700, you know that 197 is the third stepsister of Oaks Park. 197 was joined in the park by Southern Pacific 4449 and Spokane. Apparently it's Spokane. Look, y'all gotta stop yelling at me about that. There is an E at the end of that. Phonetically, it should be Spokane. It is not my fault, but Spokane, Portland and Seattle, number 700. She would sit on outdoor display for many years, dealing with the wear and tear associated with that particular situation. And additionally, over time, she would become, well, rather lonesome. In December of 1974, 4449 was pulled out of the park to be restored to pull the American Freedom Train. Then a little over a decade later, number 700 also left to begin her own restoration. 197 was the last engine left in the park, and she was there until the mid-90s. In fact, she can be briefly seen in the movie Free Willy while she was still on display in the park. No, seriously, she's there. I'm not making this up. And then later, due to a parking lot expansion project, she was moved a short distance from her original resting place. Outside of that, though, she was almost forgotten until late in 1995. When, as is the case with a lot of heritage restoration projects, a small group of individuals decided to band together and save 197. They managed to negotiate with the city of Portland, who eventually agreed to the proposal, but then she required additional mechanical work to get her ready to move at all. She had sat there a lot longer than her stepsisters, so the wear and tear on her was likely a lot worse than them. But by early February of 1996, she was almost ready to move for the first time in nearly 40 years. On February 10th, she was finally removed from the park and sent to the Brooklyn Roundhouse, rejoining her stepsisters. 4449 and 700 also called that place their new home. Interestingly, moving her became a lot more of an alarming project than previously thought, as that day coincided with severe flooding in the Portland area after a series of very bad winter storms. The Willamette River had actually come up so high that it was bordering on the embankment where 197 was sitting. The East Portland Traction Company, now known as the Oregon Pacific Railroad, who owned the nearby right-of-way, actually had to clear several mudslides the previous day in order to get 197 out of there, but she was successfully moved without any major incidents. Getting 197 back up into operation has been a trying experience. It's taken a long time, and it's still ongoing actually. As of 2008, the job was about half complete, and expected to be completed as long as volunteers and funds are made available. The non-profit all-volunteer group called themselves the Friends of OR&N 197. Until 2012, all 3 Stepsisters were stored in the last remaining roundhouse in Portland, but Union Pacific announced plans to close it in order to expand their freight yard, and as a result, the engines needed a new home. The non-profit Oregon Rail Heritage Foundation was formed to develop plans and build a new facility for the trio. Construction on the Oregon Rail Heritage Center, or ORHC, began in October 2011, and the job was completed just the following year, with all 3 engines being moved into the new facility. As I've mentioned when I've talked about it previously, this location is the lap of luxury when it comes to a preserved steam locomotive. Indoors, climate-controlled, the engines are perfectly safe there, and 197 has sat alongside her 2 stepsisters all this time, but as of the making of this video, she still isn't running yet. While 4449 and 700 have both had their own excursion careers, 197 has taken a lot longer to get up to steam again. And it's likely because she sat around so much longer. The wear and tear on her was much worse. Therefore, the work required to fix her would be a lot more major. As of May of 2023, it was announced the ongoing restoration did receive a major boost. A former Union Pacific executive agreed to help raise the $1 million still needed to get her back under steam. Yeah, see, everyone wants locomotives back under steam. Look, this is a Pacific. She's not the biggest engine in the world. $1 million on top of what's already been done. That's how expensive this can be. But the good news is that over the last few years, a number of significant points of the project have been finished, including rebuilding her air pump and the fabrication of an all-new cab for her. But she still needs work done on both her boiler and the running gear, which probably explains the $1 million price tag. Those 2 things are usually the most expensive bits, so yeah, I believe that. But they're still plugging away at her, and hopefully someday 197 will be able to run again, alongside both of her stepsisters. Either way though, it is a pretty happy story. By all accounts, they could have been left to waste away, but all 3 wound up being saved, finding a new home together, and they remain so to this day. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders: Some Dude 267, Orange Glass, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Brian, Jack Carson's Road Videos, Lord Off 444, A Person 723, Ro Hutta 2060, Isurfer 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Red Lion, NS Productions 8104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Ohio Trucker 1, Andrew Bowen, Josh Johnson, Hayden DeGrow, Caleb Rainwaters, Prez Drenton, Master of None, The Oklahoma Hot Rail, Liam Wright, Mr. Sleepy, Travis Delinsky, Jared Brussel, Joshua Long, Hannah Bird, Amtrak 2024 Productions, Tommy Rossini, That Guy with a Beard, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitchen 131-232, Mark Holding, Dr. Racer 78, G-Wiz, Mr. Terevel, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.